You want to start us off?
Sure. So the episode immediately opens up after the events of the chase, and the party is settling down in this room that's been provided to them. I think it was called the Teak Court. It was like a civil building near the city square.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of like, wow, that was crazy. And they all sort of take different turns, sort of patrolling and sleeping like a typical night. Orem patrols first. He climbs to the top of the building and sees out into the distance. He can actually see really the edge of the Bainesfall Plateau, which is where the Iron Authority. It's the beginning of the area that the Iron Authority belongs. He sees that in the distance, and he's awash with this sense of, do I have what it takes to really protect them and take care of them? He knows he wants to protect his friends, but he's like, I'm a halfling. Am I enough to really do this? During Fern's patrol, or actually before she goes on her patrol, she actually has, while she's sleeping, this moment of sleep paralysis, and it seems to last for hours, where she's sleeping, but she's also aware of her surroundings, and she even sees Dark Fern wearing the circlet pressing on her chest, and it's very disturbing. Until finally it subsides. She actually gets a little sleep, and Orem comes and wakes her up for her patrol. During Dariax's patrol, he observes the city square, and he hears a voice that says, "Hi." And he looks and sees, and it's the Observer talking to him. And the Observer and him chat for a little bit and have a little bit of a, I'd say, a flirty back and forth.
I ship it.
Yeah, and the Observer basically says, "Hey, I just wanted you to know how proud I am of you. You make decisions so boldly and stick to them just immediately." And he's like, "That's the nicest anyone's ever described that to me." And then she talks a little bit more about the gift again and says that she's giving him a gift. And he says, "Well, can it be a physical gift, or is it a physical gift?" And she's like, "Do you want it to be?" And he feels this little itching in his back, but not much more is revealed from that moment. During Dorian's patrol, he's looking down in the plaza and sort of the remains of the battle to find his trusty hand axe that Opal had used to carve up the kidnapper.
Ooh.
He does find it. It's covered in blood and guts. And as he's cleaning it off, he realizes he has this little strand of something in his eye. And he pulls out this arm's length strand of silk out of his eye. And also, while this is happening, he's hearing this. I don't say he's hearing a voice. He's talking very negatively to himself and saying,
Yeah.
Of course you're going to screw things up. Of course you're basically a loser. Of course your brother is running the kingdom, basically. Why would it be you? You always fail. And he's really ruminating on these negative thoughts until finally he, as he sees the Observer and makes his way towards the Observer, the voice sort of quiets and things calm down. And he gets out and he experiences peace and sort of plays his lute and dozes off. And Abria describes it as, even though he's only asleep for a little bit, he gets a full night's rest in just those few moments. Opal, during her patrol, I'm not really sure if she had a patrol or not, but she's definitely trying to internalize what happened. She has sort of like this moment of not really quite remembering that she chopped some dude's head off. She's kind of traumatized.
Yeah.
And kind of in shock. And the one thing she does know is that for whatever reason, she can't seem to reach Ted. And that's what happens with everybody. In the morning, as the party's getting up, Dorian actually sneaks off to a nearby kitchen and pretends to be a waiter with a towel over his arm to try to get some breakfast wine. And there's this bugbear chef who's very suspicious and is like, "Well, who are you? What are you doing?" And Dorian's like, "Oh, I'm the waiter personally responsible for the adventurers who are upstairs." And the bugbear's like, "Oh, wow, definitely take whatever you need." So he grabs the fruit, he grabs the wine, and just kind of scampers off with all this stuff. Orem's actually followed him. He didn't realize this, and it's kind of like, "Here, let me help you with that. Maybe next time you can just ask, And so they take all the breakfast back to the party, and they're all like, "Ooh, cool, mimosas," basically. And so they start to enjoy breakfast. Thraskur arrives and is like, "Hey, so what have you guys decided you're going to do?" And they've actually been chatting about this before Thraskur even comes in. And they're like, "Yeah, we're going to go south to help Umeji, your friend." And Thraskur's really relieved by this and is like, "Okay, well, let's get you equipped to go." And all these servers come in and they start to bring in like all these rations, supplies, pretty much everything that they would need for their journey. And the goal is to basically go down and help Umeji. Thraskor gives them a map that's very basic. It doesn't really help them too much, but it's designed to lead them south to Tazarm, which is the capital of the Iron Authority. They're going to they're also told to follow a star constellation, which I don't remember what the constellation was called. Do you?
Actually, no.
Okay. It's a constellation. I don't know if it's that important. And then to also, they're like, hey, basically, you're basically going the right way if you get to Nirdal Sarket, which is the ruins of our southernmost city. So they're like, okay, cool. And before they leave, one of the servers, a 12-year-old girl, hands a letter over from Gnar to go to Umeji. Basically says, hey, can you send this letter on behalf of Gnar? Or rather, they realize it's from Gnar. Even though at first Derex is like, I think it's an assassin, and it freaks the girl out, and she runs off and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the party decides, okay, yeah, let's make our way south. They travel with relative ease. They eventually make it to near Sarkat. And in the ruins of this ancient city, the most obvious thing is this giant, massive floating cube. And I said that right. Literally, there's a giant cube that's just slowly spinning, and it's effaced with all these different sigils and symbols. And these sigils and symbols are also marked on these pillars that are surrounding the cube, which some of them are knocked over. And the party recognizes that some of these sigils are sigils of the iconic gods of the worlds of Exandria, some of the good gods, so to speak, and some of the betrayer gods. So like they see a spider, for example, representing the Spider Queen, although they note that it doesn't seem to look as sinister as they would assume. Well, looking at the cube, Fern's like, let's throw a rock at it. Why not? And so throws a rock. It sticks to the cube. They're like, wow, that's really interesting. They basically pick Opal to be the one to go up to the cube because I think Orm's like, hey, you're the most magic-y. Maybe you would be the right person to go. And Dariax decides to tie a rope to her in case she gets stuck so that he can basically pull her off. So they decide to go under the cube, and in doing this, they both trip basically and fall, and they both get sucked up onto the cube. And it's in this moment that they realize, they're kind of like, thinking they're going to get stuck to it, and they land on their feet on the cube as it's spinning, and they realize that every face of the cube has its own sense of gravity, so to speak.
Right, yeah.
And they're actually able to walk on the cube. In fact, Dariax starts running in circles around the cube, and it's like, this is awesome. And they're like, well, what do we do? And they start to remember, oh yeah, back at that runestone where Melora's test happened, if we touched that, when we touched it, we understood what it meant. So they decide to basically put their hands on each face of the cube and touch it. And the rest of the party actually all make their way onto the cube, and they each take a face, and the cube is glowing. And as they touch each face, and they get these phrases that form in their mind. And also, by the way, while they're reading out these phrases, the cube is changing colors and sort of, it seems like almost unlocking as they're saying the phrases.
Yeah.
And there's this big stone construct golem that seems to be getting more and more aggressive as they read each phrase. But so the phrases are, we weren't really quite sure on the order of these, but the universe above, the universe within, remember what came before, decide what comes next, provide for all, a shield to protect. And as they say those final words, as they realize what the last face means, this deep hum happens. It starts to get louder and louder. Fern actually gets down and actually is able with her strength to stop the cube from moving. And she's like, kind of like, haha, I stopped it. And then the cube explodes.
Ooh, baby.
And they're all dead. No, I'm just kidding. All right, why don't you take the rest of it from there?
Okay, yeah, good job. All right, so I think that's also, is that where we cut to break too?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, boom, we return from break. Fern has just tried to stifle this cube, but to no avail. And so this cube explodes, and we're presented with like this new map. and on the new map there's like, it's awesome by the way, and there's all these chunks of the cube that are now scattered about, and the party members are on various pieces of this cube, still attracted to this like anomalous gravity that it has created or provided. And I think Dariax is like in the dead center with this stone golem like
Right.
construct, and it's cool because Abria's got like this smoky like dry ice effect that's like permeating the whole thing. It's awesome. So we roll initiative, and basically combat has started. And what's really awesome about this encounter, Abria basically, did some really cool homebrew stuff here. And she basically made it so like the energy of this place gave them each a special ability for the battle. And each round she had the players roll, I think it was a D6, and depending on what
Hmm.
they rolled, that informed the ability that they would get. And so we've got the golem that's in the center platform versus Dariax, but then there are also two other golems that sprout up at other places as this fight goes on, and they seem to be powered by this like blue flaming energy that is reminiscent of what like the cube was composed of. Um, so Dorian, his ability that he was given was the ability to like control wells of gravity to affect himself. So he could kind of manipulate his own gravity to. He didn't actually use it really in the whole fight, but it was cool nonetheless. So Dariax, he gained the ability. I forgot what it was called, but he could choose either light or heavy. And if he chose light, it meant he got to attack twice. And if he chose heavy, it meant he basically crit. Like his damage was doubled, basically. Um, Fern, I think, got the coolest ability of everyone. She got the ability, and to take a step back here, Abria keeps describing it, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, like you see time kind of like before you. And in Fern's case, she says you see time not as a road, but as like a web sprawled out before you, and you can reach ahead and like pluck different strands of the web and affect time. And the mechanics of how she explains this works is that anyone within 30 feet of Fern, she can cause them as a reaction to do a reroll. So she could reroll herself, she could reroll an ally, or she could make an enemy reroll and any d20 roll. So that was super
Okay.
cool. And Opal got the ability to she got this pool of healing that she was able to decide she could use on anybody. And then finally Aurum got
Imagine getting the reroll one, and the next one's like, "Ooh, what am I gonna get?" You get plus 11 heals.
uh,
Oh,
and
anyway,
then
continue.
Aurum got, oh yeah, and I think Aurum was the other one she described as, she was like, Aurum, you see before you like time unfurl as like a road, or she used some sort of like flowery descriptive language like that. But
Mhm.
essentially what his ability was is he got to get an extra battle maneuver, which is just a mechanic of his fighter class. So he basically got to double up on those. Um, so everyone gets these cool abilities. We've got these golems that are pretty tough, and the party's basically all kind of split right now. I mean, they're all together, but they're all like in different encounters with golems around this gravity well
Mhm.
awesome battlefield. So while this is all happening, in addition to the golems, Opal, Abria notes, is getting stuck with these residuum needles. One every couple rounds, it seems, like one in her forehead, one in her shoulder, and then I think another one in her other shoulder. And as these are happening, she eventually is picking up on like where they're coming from. And she notices that they're not coming from any of the golems or anything. They seem to be coming from about like 100 yards away, in like a thicket, I think she describes.
Mhm.
And she's told that they don't seem to be tethered to you, meaning like the needles aren't tethered to Opal. Um, but that's really all she can glean from it at this point. Um, So, meanwhile, one of the golems tries to smash Dariax, and he uses his favored by the gods ability to try and invade it. And what happens here is earlier when Blake mentioned that when Dariax was talking to the observer, he felt a little like itch on his back, but nothing came of it. Well, the payoff here was that 4 wings sprout out of his back, and this was a gift from the observer. And Dariax can now fly, and he uses those wings to avoid the smash. And it was crazy, and it was awesome. um, but so they basically defeat the golems, and as the battle is coming to a close, Opal misty steps onto the ground and just tries to sprint towards where these needles are coming from, since she's figured that out. And as Opal gets close, Murata steps out and is revealed to be the one who is tossing these residual needles, and she has a big residuum spike similar to the ones she's had in previous episodes, and she jams it into the ground. And when she does, Opal feels like a tinge of energy go to where the needle in her right shoulder was, and it just gets like impossibly heavy, and like her right side slumps to the ground. Then Murata slams another spike in the ground, and the same thing happens with the left, and Opal just like falls to the ground, and like her top half of her body is like numb. And so Murata's walking up, and the rest of the party at this point is probably still 60, 70 yards away. So it's just Opal and Murata. So Murata steps up to her, and she's speaking, but she doesn't seem to be speaking to Opal. She says, "Whatever your name is, I'm going to free you from this little girl, and together we're going to change the world." And Opal's like, "What? What are you talking about?" And Murata's like, "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Ted." And Opal's like, "Ted's not here," because she hasn't been able to communicate with Ted. And Murata says that's not true. And so Opal tries to cast a spell. I think
Mine Sliver.
silver or sliver. Whoa.
I think it's
And
Sliver.
it only has verbal components. So even though she can't use her hands, it's fine. But Murata effortlessly just flicks her hand and counterspells it, and says that, like, basically, nice try. Like, there's nothing you could do to stop me. And she kind of speaks up. There's like nothing any of you could do to stop me. Like, I've been through way too much to be stopped by like the lot of you at this point. And as she's kind of like gloating, saying that, effortlessly counterspelling and like walking up to Opal, who again is just like basically paralyzed, the episode essentially ends. And cliffhanger style. And there's no post-credit scene this time, so that's all we're left with.
And that's episode 7, Beyond the Heart of the City.